Man, it is good to be back. Just so you know, I've got Lawrence de Groot here from the Netherlands, who is the European coordinator for Sea Shepherd. So I'm going to read a thing that I prepared on my last day in prison. I'll read that first, then I've got a few issues that you guys may be interested in, and then I'll just sling it out to questions. So bear with me on my prison prepared talk. Since 1987, when the moratorium on commercial whaling came into effect, Japan's so-called scientific research program has killed over 10,000 whales and generated over $1 billion in revenues. To call this anything other than commercial whaling is farcical. Japan has also tried to call it traditional, and yet they have no history of ever hunting whales in Antarctica. The only aspect that is traditional is the way the whales die. They are speared through the back with an explosive harpoon. They then spend the last 30 minutes of their lives thrashing in agony as they slowly but surely bleed to death. And while this may be acceptable for Japan, for most other civilised nations, it's a disgrace. It brings shame on Japan, it brings shame on the Japanese government, and it brings shame on the Japanese people. What upsets me the most about this, however, is where it happens. It's in my backyard, and it's in the backyard of all Aussies and Kiwis. That Japanese vessels sneak past us each summer to then slaughter whales in our whale sanctuary is deeply offensive. Given the events of the last campaign, I'm left wondering just what it will take for the Japanese to finally understand that this is unacceptable to us. Must more conservationists be locked up in their prisons? Must more boats be rammed or sunk? Or must people start to actually die? We came so close to being killed in Antarctica. If the captain of the Shona Maru had turned his vessel 2 seconds earlier, I'd be bringing my crew back to their families in body bags. Our lives were risked daily in what has descended into an ugly war. On more than one occasion, I was asking myself, why am I doing this? And like all of my crew, I came back to the same answer. I'm standing up for what I believe in, and I'm standing up for what's right. And I'm not alone. When I boarded the Shona Maru, I did so as the captain of the Addy Gill. But I was also representing all New Zealanders, Australians, Americans and others who have had enough. It's time that the Japanese packed up their explosive harpoons and their 12-gauge shotguns and went back to their own waters. In going to Antarctica, that was what I hoped for. Instead, I ended up in a Japanese prison. My trial in Japan represents a miscarriage in justice, not because I stood before their court, but because the captain of the Shona Maru did not. He rams and sinks my boat, and the Japanese Coast Guard failed to even investigate it. I then step aboard his, and I spend the next 5 months incarcerated with a bunch of rapists, murderers, and mafia. If 5 months imprisonment is truly what I deserve, then he should be facing a minimum of 5 years. Sadly, however, he'll never be brought to justice. Collusion between Japanese Coast Guard, the Japanese government, and the Japanese whaling industry that ensured I felt the full weight of Japanese law is also ensuring that the captain and his crew do not. Japan insists on upholding the law, but only when it suits them. This is especially so when you consider the many international laws and treaties that they continue to break with impunity and on an ongoing basis. Here's a few from the last 12 months. Japan continues to hunt whales in breach of numerous IWC resolutions demanding a cessation of all lethal research. Japan continues to hunt whales in Antarctica in breach of the IWC Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary. Japan continues to hunt sei whale in the Northern Pacific in breach of CITES, the Convention on Endangered Species. Japan continues to refuel its fleet below 60 degrees south in breach of the Treaty of Antarctica. The Nishin Maru continues its annual discharge of over 1,000 tonnes of offal into Antarctic waters in breach of the Treaty of Antarctica. All these crimes and treaty violations, and not a single one investigated, let alone prosecuted. And yet they convict me for possession of a knife and damaging a net. It demonstrates the blatant judicial hypocrisy that exists within Japan. Of the 5 convictions I received, I do, however, agree with 4 of them. I did board the Shonamaru, I did damage a net, I did possess a knife, and I did disrupt their business. That was my job. I disagree strongly, however, with the assault charge. At the time of the incident, one of my crew saw them shoot themselves with their own impulse gun. This is confirmed in the Animal Planet video.
Well, there's always things you can improve, but I think, you know, our goal was getting Pete out of prison, and that's what eventually what happened. So, yeah, I think we did it in the right way.
And if you could have done it differently, what would you have done?
Well, we would have loved to have Pete's legal team who was informed to have, you know, brought the message somehow to Pete, so he wouldn't be so shocked when he was in prison. But apart from that, I think it went great to Pete out.
What about the people of New Zealand who donated to the Sea Shepherd organisation? They were effectively lied to by that organisation with that release. What do you say to that?
Well, that's a choice we have to make. Like, it's fantastic that these people donate, but our priority was getting Pete out of prison. And if we're going to go around and informing everybody about our strategy that we follow, then there's, you know, no point of making that decision. And that's something we have all over the world where we make a decision. Some people are informed, some people are not, and that's how we work.
So they can't really trust the organisation now.
Yeah, they can still trust us, but they give money to us for our actions in the Southern Ocean or all over the world. And this is a separate case where somebody was in prison, and we made a decision. We have had people in prison before. In 2003, we had 2 crew members who cut open the nets in Taiji to free the dolphins. They were in prison, and Paul's been in prison several times. So, you know, they trust Paul and the organisation, and that's what they donate to.
So something that I learned on this campaign, it is so hard running an organisation like Sea Shepherd. You've got a small team of professionals in Whare Harbour, but then there's hundreds of volunteers, all with different priorities. You've got 3 boats now, and I think Sea Shepherd, a little bit at the moment, is growing pains too. The organisation has grown enormously over the last 12 months. And, you know, it's a challenge running an organisation like that, but, you know, if their priority was to get me out of prison, I'm happy for that, and I'm happy to be here.
You're effectively trying to make a cultural change in a country that doesn't acknowledge that it needs one.
Yes.
You don't find that arrogant in any way, that you're coming along trying to tell a country that it's wrong and it needs to change its ways?
For me personally, it's about Antarctica. I just don't believe they belong in Antarctica. If they were to go and hunt whales in their own waters, as they have traditionally, I wouldn't like it, but I'm not going to go up there and protest about it. The fact that they come down into my waters and hunt whales is what really offends me. It's different. We kind of argue on different planes on this. The Japanese, they don't argue on science. That's their excuse to enable it to be done almost legally. They're talking about tradition and culture. For me, it's about territory. For other people, it's about animal cruelty. And that's the challenge we face here, is we're arguing on different planes, and there's very little intersection on it. Not easy to change, but, you know, I mean, America had slavery, and they managed to change that. That was part of their culture. Britain used to burn witches at the stake. You know, because it's traditional culture doesn't make it right. And society just does gradually change what it finds acceptable, and I hope long term the Japanese will change. The thing with Japan is for most Japanese, they are actually indifferent to whaling. It's not really a big issue for them. I would liken it to abortion in New Zealand. Most Kiwis aren't really highly for it or against it. Most of us just kind of, it's not really such an issue for us. That's a little bit like whaling in Japan for most people, except for older men. And for the right-wing fascists, or the right-wing people in Japan tend to be very staunch on whaling too. So it's not a huge demographic that is really pro-whaling, but the demographic that is are quite powerful people in Japan, and that's a difficulty we face. Cool bananas.
All right.
All right. Hey, look, thanks everyone for coming along today. Appreciate it.